My name is Tom Simmons. I'm going to be taking you through ModelPort 2.0 and linking Archicad to the rich world of objects. This is a new object importer and editor for Archicad. It's actually been around a while. It's actually, I would say, an update to it. But we're going to be focusing today specifically on sort of expanding your access to objects. We'll talk a little bit about online sources for objects, including BIM components, BIM objects, 3D warehouse, TurboSquid, Design Connected, and 3D Sky. We'll also look at how you can convert 3D objects, 3D models into objects, including format options and pros and cons of built-in versus add-on converters. And we'll look at object import management, and we'll go through a number of different parts of that as well. The first part I want to start with is reviewing online sources for objects. Now, if you're not familiar with BIMcomponents.com, you should look into this. This is a native Archicad object format website. It's developed for or developed by Graphisoft specifically, and is used by a number of different users to download very specific Archicad objects, or I should say objects that are in the Archicad format, because it's only Archicad format objects that are in this site. So it's a great website. If you have not used it, I would recommend it. Also is BIMobject.com. BIMobject is a very good resource actually for manufacturer-specific objects. It was developed originally by several people who left Graphisoft to go develop BIMobject.com. So it was developed originally focused on Archicad objects. It has recently also been diversifying itself to Revit format as well. They acquired a library from Autodesk last year, the year before, that gave them a huge amount of Revit format objects into this library as well. So it's a combination now of Archicad and Revit formats. So when you go to select an object within that, of course, you'll get Archicad, Revit, SketchUp, and potentially other formats as well that you can download and then bring into Archicad, depending upon, again, if it's a Revit format, you download the Revit add-on from bim6x.com. You can import those RFA objects into Archicad as well. So you really have access to pretty much the entire library here, even if they are an RFA object. And because these are focused on manufacturers, that means you're getting manufacturer-specific types of objects. Now, another popular resource is 3D Warehouse. I'm sure many of you have used this, particularly those of you who have come from SketchUp. This is a very popular website. It has expanded in terms of its usefulness beyond just SketchUp users now, and that is because of the Collada format, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's also a free. They're also free 3D models. So there's no pay to access these models. One of the things they did do recently, as I mentioned, is they added the Collada format. The Collada format is it's a DAE is the actual suffix for that, and it is an open exchange format. So what this has done is it's opened up the ability now for us to use the the SketchUp, the 3D warehouse as either DAE or SketchUp, depending upon which is better the way that you're importing. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The other things that's nice about this is, of course, it has a wide range of objects, from lots of different cars. Tesla is a good example here, to many types of different objects, many of which have been created by users. So some of which are very detailed and have great, great amounts of usefulness for us, and others maybe not so much. And then others and they also have expanded into different manufacturers, so that's also available within this website as well. Kohler and a bunch of others, you can access objects specifically developed by the companies, so that's also available. But of course, you really need to kind of pay attention to the objects you download, because some of the ones you get from any resource where you have users developing them, some users are very attentive to detail and others are not. So, you really have to kind of look at the objects you're downloading, whether or not they're useful for you, and to what level of detail they've been developed by the original authors of those objects. Another really good resource is Design Connected. If you've not used this before, Design Connected is a fabulous resource for high quality objects. It's at designconnected.com, and they've got over 670 manufacturers, over 1,140 designers. I mean, it's a very rich, very powerful format or resource. You do pay by the object. There are also free objects. So depending upon which you're looking for, you can get a lot of free objects on here. And then there are objects that will cost you money as well. But these are really high quality objects. So when you download these, one of the nice things about them, and you'll get a lot of great quotes on here from people who've used it, is that these are professionally done. So you're not getting objects that are developed by users that they haven't gone in and actually looked at the detail, and there's a lot of really nice things about these objects. So when you download these objects, you can be rest assured they're going to be high quality. They will have gone through a lot of a quality check to make sure that they work well, and yeah, that you're getting your money's worth when you're paying for them. Another really popular website is TurboSquid. This is actually probably the largest website. I mean, it's got over 727,000 objects, and it's very popular for architects and designers. Gensler uses it as well. Again, there's a lot of free objects on here that you can download, and many high-quality free objects. So it's a great place to start to be able to access these. Many of these objects are in, as you can kind of see here, Max, OBJ files, 3ds, a variety of formats here, SKP. There are different collections that you can download as well. Of course, some of these are for pay, and some of these can get quite expensive. I mean, you can pay $44 for a washing machine, or $54 for for something like this, or $59 for just for a cappuccino maker, which it's kind of crazy. But it really depends on what you're using it for and to what level of detail you need these objects. So for many cases, a lot of the free objects on here are actually really quite good. So it's just a matter of going through here and seeing which ones are going to be best for you and what you need in terms of that detail. It's similar to 3D Warehouse, the objects depends upon the author. One of the nice things about TurboSquid, though, is that you can actually go through and they actually have toggles on there to be able to say, if I want high level of quality, it will show only the high level quality objects, and it will drop out the objects that have lower quality. And there's ratings on there that they can rate the objects. So it's a really good system for being able to much more easily identify the high quality objects versus the low quality objects when you're searching. And then 3D Sky is another really good resource. This is based on a subscription service. So, they have over 90,000 free objects on there. They also have the ones that are part of their subscription service. They are developed by artists and designers. They have a little more high quality review of these objects than does 3D Warehouse. And you'll find really high quality objects on here. And you'll see any ones that have Pro means it's part of that subscription service. And then you also have the free objects as well that are really nice objects that are part of this service. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. Each of these different options I'm showing you have their pluses and minuses, but there are some really great resources out there beyond the sort of BIMcomponents.com that is just the standard part of Archicad that you can access and that bring in Archicad. Now, what I'm going to talk about next is each of these different services has pros and cons in terms of how we can bring that information into Archicad, and whether or not we want to bring it in just using the built-in importing options in Archicad, or using something like ModelPort to help you with managing those imported objects. So if we're using the built-in defaults in Archicad, then we have the options to bring in DWG, IFC, SketchUp, Rhino, 3D, Collada DAE, stereolithography. These are the built-in formats. Now I can also add in Revit RFA, which I don't have on here, but that is an add-on. It's a free add-on from bimsxx.com, and you can download that and install that, and that will be another one of these options that allows me to bring in that RFA object. Now, if you add on ModelPort, you can bring in not only the Collada DAE, which I just mentioned as part of the standard in Archicad, but it will also open up the ability for you to import in OBJ. As I just mentioned, TurboSquid is a good example where a lot of the formats there are in OBJ format. You can bring in FBX, which is another very popular format. And you can bring in 3ds. Now, there is a 3ds add-on that's free with Archicad that you can go to in the accessories add-ons. If you just go to, I think it's Archicad/downloads. But if you bring in, you can install the 3ds format. 3ds format is kind of an older format, so it's not always the best format, which is why they don't make it a default in Archicad. But it is one of the formats that's available out there. Now, ModelPort 2.0 that was just released really expanded these formats. We can now also bring in Modo LXO, which is a really popular format for doing sculpting and 3D painting, animation. It's become really popular with visualization and artists, professionals. Lightwave LWO is another really popular format for 3D models and photorealistic renderings, animations, VR. Blender 3D. This is a free and open source 3D creation suite for modeling, rigging, animation. Again, another popular format out there amongst the many artists and visualization professionals. Alembic ABC is another interchange file format that can be used. AutoCAD DXF, I know many of you know this, but this is nice because now we can bring in DXF models into using ModelPort, which means, as I'll show you in a minute, you have a lot more editing options that you can use with this. And finally, stereolithography STL. That isn't a standard format Archicad as well, but of course, with this now ModelPort means that you'll have the ability to edit any of those objects and those models within the ModelPort feature set. So let's talk a little bit about our pros and cons of built-in versus add-on converters. So as I'll show you in a minute, with Archicad's built-in importer, it can create kind of messy 2D and 3D graphics if the model contains curves. So I'm going to show you an example here, just to kind of get make you understand kind of the difference between using a standard built-in converter versus using something like ModelPort. So if we go to a 3D warehouse, we can go searching for lights, right? And there's a lot of different lights, and a lot of these lights have curves to them. And so this is a great example. This is a basic schoolhouse type ceiling pendant, very popular for these days for a lot of projects. One of the nice things I mentioned now is that we can now export this as, or I should say download this from the 3D warehouse as a Collada file DAE format, which means that we can bring it in either in Archicad using its Collada DAE import or using the ModelPort option. So if we bring this in using the Archicad option, it's going to look like this when it comes in plan, and it's going to look like this when we look at it in 3D. If we use the ModelPort option, which I'll show you in more detail in a minute, this is the new interface for ModelPort, then we're going to have a nice 2D graphic on the 2D side of it, and a very nice 3D graphic without all the extra line work on the 3D side of it. And this is a big, big deal. When you start talking about needing to, bring in objects from other sources, it can get really cumbersome sometimes when you have to go through the process of doing a lot of editing to the 2D graphic. Even if it has no curves, it can still bring in a lot of other extra miscellaneous lines and stuff. But particularly when it has curves, it really starts to muddy up these graphics on the 2D side of it and also on the 3D side of it. So this is really important. Now, if we look at this, here is, if we go to Archicad and we bring in a straight SketchUp object, not a DAE object, but a straight SketchUp object, it does clean up the edges. This is a good example. This is just a simple cabinet that I'm bringing in. That's a Kohler cabinet with a sink in it. And so we're using the SketchUp plugin or built-in to bring it in directly using the built-in resource in Archicad. And these are those two options. This is ModelPort. And so as we can see here, if we go to our 3D view, it's kind of the same thing. We have our SketchUp, we have our DAE, and we have ModelPort. And you can see in those three different views, three very different type of quality when it was brought in. And a lot of that line work, yes, we could go to our visualization, go to 3D styles, and I can turn off the line work there using some options in the 3D style settings, which is contours. You can turn contours on or off. The disadvantage of turning it off is that means it also turns the contours off for other elements where you might want to see those contours. So that means that you're going to be basically eliminating something for the purpose of a problem you have with the object. So let's take a little bit look at how we can edit these imported objects once they come into Archicad. And I'm going to look again at editing these objects using Archicad's built-in process. And then I'm going to look at editing the objects using ModelPort's new editing features. So if we were to bring in an imported object into Archicad using that same DAE format or SketchUp type import format, then we would have some options when we bring that in. Once we import that in and we open it up into our object selection settings, we do have the ability to, of course, add our name and description. We can rotate it. We could, of course, change the size of it, and we can scale it. But those are our options. Now, we can change the material, but the only way we can change the material is by going down to our model panel here and clicking that, and then basically choosing to change the panel choose to change the material for the entire element versus for individual components within that. And what I mean by that is that if I bring this in and I want to change just the sink material here, I can't do that without exploding it into a morph, because if I will go into the model panel and change the material, I'll change the material for everything. That means the material for the handle, which is different, the material for the wood, and the material for my sink, and material for the tap. All these are 4 different materials within here. And if I explode this into go back and choose to change it with my model panel here, I'm changing it for the entire element. Now I can convert this into a morph. If you've not done that before, this is a great way to do it. You can bring in an object. You can right-click on that object. I can say convert selection into a morph. And it's going to tell you if you do that, and it's got large number of polygons, which this one does because of the sink and tap, they can potentially affect the performance in Archicad. And so I go ahead and convert that. And of course, now I can select this panel, and I can open up my materials, and I can go in and I can change with that morph just that panel. So I can do that. But of course, one of the biggest problems here is I've got to go through and I've got to select every individual morph in this object, which can take some time to do that. Plus, it did not solve the problem of all the polygonal lines that have appeared here because of the curves, and even areas which don't have curves. And the other problem is that when you explode it, you lose the textures. So if I have textures that are actually connected to this morph, then I've lost that. So, I'm sorry, textures connected to the object. So that's one of the caveats of using the built-in settings when you import an object, is that you just simply cannot control that object in terms of the way it looks, in terms of its quality, in terms of materials, in terms of graphics. You really have limited abilities for being able to control it. And so that was one of the reasons why ModelPort was rebuilt today. So one of the things you'll see here is we have a new interactive selection option within this new 3D window that we have. So we can now select elements by material or by object or element. And so in this case, I can select by the individual materials. And so rather than exploding this bed as I've imported in here. Instead, I can go in and select each of the individual materials and change those as I need to on within this preview window, and very quickly change that and be able to edit that. I can also control material properties such as transparency and texture. So, for example, I can select this particular picture, and I can change the glass there in terms of its transparency. I can select the glasses, which don't even show up right now, and change that transparency as well. So if I want them to be slightly more opaque, so I can see them better in a rendering I'm doing, or in my 3D view, I can change that. And this is what's really nice about this. When I import in now an object into Archicad using ModelPort, I can simply go in and edit these elements directly within this interface. Also, you can control element visibility. Now, this is really important. One of the things that I have found over the years of importing objects into Archicad, whether I import it into Archicad using its built-in settings or some other add-on, is oftentimes the author of that object didn't really think about how, the fact that when somebody else imports that object into their program, that, if they didn't turn off certain parts of the object, that you're not going to be able to control that. So as a good example, I select this light. This looks like a great light. I want to use this as my project. And lo and behold, someone forgot to turn off the rendered part of it. So now I can actually go in and I can actually turn that off within ModelPort by being able to control the layers. So as you can see, my layers over here to the upper right, which has a little eyes next to it, that means visibility, means I can select any element within a view now, and I can actually control the visibility of that element. So in this case, as a good example, I was able to turn off that rendered view that an author forgot to turn off, and be able to control that really easily. And that's really important when you bring objects into Archicad, is being able to control the visibility of those elements. Also being able to control and manage these textures in any view. So not only can I select these elements within my 3D view, but I can select them with the plan view, or within an elevation view, or any other view. So this is nice because it just allows you more flexibility to be able to select and drill down to being able to edit elements that you want to work on. The other thing that's really important is being able to change the materials within these views. So for example, in this silver material of our barbecue here has this kind of banding on it, right? And so for me to be able to change that finish and select that and change that finish within here, and then be able to update that automatically in my view without even having to get out of ModelPort, allows me to quickly change my materials using this built-in interface. So again, just giving you more flexibility to be able to make changes here without having to explode the element, without having to go through a lot of steps to be able to simply change the material. And I can also change the texture. So we have a direct link to the textures now, so I can go and I can select a different texture from a different folder, and quickly being able to change that to a different JPEG without having to go through a lot of extra steps to be able to do that. And being able to change my pin material. So how often have we brought in a 2D graphic, and that graphic doesn't look the way we want it? So we want to be able to change the line weight. We want to be able to change the color. And to be able to do this directly within my settings here gives me a lot more flexibility for being able to do that. And so here I can update that. And now within my plan view, I have an updated object that shows different colors for both 2D and 3D for that element. And this is really important because, as we know, many times when we bring in these objects, maybe the graphics do look better than they did if I just imported them directly in Archicad, but I still need to be able to edit those graphics and potentially punch some parts of it to make it thicker, maybe recede some parts of it by making it thinner, and maybe if I'm doing color, be able to change the colors as well. Okay, so that's some of the editing parts that we've improved in ModelPort 2.0. Another really important part of Model 2.0 is the ability to manage these imported objects. Now, I want to preface this by making you understand that when you import these objects and they have high polygon counts, which means that those objects I just brought in, that simple Kohler cabinet, had all those polygons for that sink and the polygons for the tap. That's a lot of information. And so these objects, they can be really high polygon counts for that. And so you need to be able to manage that. Otherwise, it will decrease the performance of your project. So one of the things that we did was we implemented a polygon reduction tool within ModelPort. And this allows us to basically change that polygon count from, say, 106,000 polygons to a smaller polygon count. So this is actually a chair. It's all it is a chair. And this chair has 106,314 polygons, and that's one chair. So just to kind of keep that in context, I mean, Archicad objects shouldn't have more than a couple hundred polygons, and ideally no more than maybe 10 or 20,000, maybe 30,000 polygons at the most. So to have 106,000 polygons is enormous. So what we've done is we've added now a polygon reduction tool to ModelPort. The way it works, you select the object and you open up ModelPort. And then you go to to select the object at the top here, this little square right here, which basically selecting the information about that object. And so by doing that, a little bit here, okay. By doing that, I can then select my polygon reduction tool. So right down here at the bottom, you'll see poly reduction. And when I select poly reduction, I can basically what's called decimate. I can actually reduce the decimation steps. And I can also see visually here that, well, there's been reduced or not. So in other words, by showing it green, showing it that it's actually okay. If I take it up to, say, a 3, okay, it's going to show even more reduction, down to 25.59. When it was actually showing red, that meant that it was actually a really high polygon count. Now, when I reduce this, it's actually going to now be reduced. And if I update my model, here's what's really nice. You'll see that it actually hasn't changed my graphic too much, a little bit there, not too bad. But it's reduced it significantly. If I look at it in 3D, even more so, is that you cannot tell the difference between the 2D, between the one that was 106,000 polygons versus the one that was now 20,000 polygons. They're pretty similar. And this is what's really, really important, because for many of you who have imported objects that have high polygon counts, you probably know that these high polygon counts create a lot of issues for your performance, particularly the more objects that you add. So being able to control these polygon counts now is a really important step to making these objects more useful for you and your projects. Now, another thing we did was to be able to allow you to control the file size of objects. So we've added in a new format in ModelPort called a ModelPort format. And you'll see that when you go to your save mode here, that you can now select the save mode to be in ModelPort, GDL, or GDL and ModelPort. Now, ModelPort is our new format that I'll talk about in a second. GDL stands for Geometric Description Language. That is actually what Graphisoft's objects are typically based on. And then you can combine these two as well. So you have these three options. Now, the reason why the ModelPort format is important is that we've actually been able to reduce up to 8 times the file size of these objects. So you'll see right now that object's 13 megabytes, okay? If I change this to the ModelPort format and I update that object, and I go back up to my menu and take a look at this in the Library Manager, we're going to see now that it reduced from 13 megabytes down to 2.1 megabytes. that is a huge reduction in the size of that object. So that's critical. I mean, if you think about the fact that you're importing in potentially, dozens of objects, maybe hundreds of objects into your project, and if those objects are, 10, 20 megabytes, and all of a sudden you can reduce them by up to 8 times smaller, that is very important. The ModelPort format also allows you to re-edit the object. So if they're a GDL format, you can bring it in and import it. But if you want to re-edit it, meaning the changing the materials directly in the ModelPort editor, doing things like that I was showing you a minute ago, it needs to be in the ModelPort format. That allows you to re-edit the object after it's been imported. And it also maintains that file reduction on computers without the ModelPort license. So if you have ModelPort, if you want to use ModelPort on multiple computers, and maybe you have 10 computers and you have ModelPort installed on 5 of the computers where they're licensed, you can still be able to benefit from that reduction of file size by simply having ModelPort installed on your other computers, even if it's not licensed. As long as it's installed there, it will actually maintain that reduction in the file size. Now, the GDL format is just your standard format, right? If I go in and I select the GDL option right here, it's going to allow me to import an object, and it's going to work just like any typical GDL format would work. It's not going to reduce the file size, so it will be a lot larger, and it's not going to store that extra ModelPort information if I want to re-edit that object after I've imported it. So, that is the disadvantage of it. But it is available there for those of you who might need it. We have made that available for that. And if you want to combine the two, the GDL and the ModelPort format, so that you don't have to worry about having ModelPort installed on other computers where it's not licensed, then you can use the GDL and the ModelPort format. The reason why that's nice is it will not reduce the file size of the object, so it does create the larger file size. However, what it does allow you to do is to re-edit those objects on other computers, so that even if it's not in the ModelPort format. So because I'm sorry, it is both GDL and the ModelPort format. So it just gives you more flexibility for that without having to worry about that. And if you are on other computers without Archicad, without ModelPort installed on Archicad, then it will allow you to be able to view those objects and to be able to access those objects on those other computers without installing ModelPort. So it's the most flexible in that you can send your model to somebody else. You have to worry about them having ModelPort on their computers, etc. It's a more flexible format if you need that as well. So we've given you those 3 options, with ModelPort, of course, being the most efficient, and the GDL plus ModelPort being the most open format, if you will, being able to use it anywhere you want. Now we've also, with this new version, we have implemented something called the ModelPort browser. Now this is a really great new opportunity for you guys to be able to manage objects that you've imported to Archicad in terms of being able to visually navigate and find these objects. So one of the biggest problems that people have is they go out and they download a bunch of objects from various sources. And oftentimes they put them in folders, and maybe they downloaded them last week or last month or a year ago, and they're going to look at them and they don't know what they look like. And so they don't really want to have to go and import every one of those in there to be able to figure out what they are. So with the ModelPort browser now, you can basically visually navigate through folders to see objects that you've downloaded from various sources. So if you bring the ModelPort browser, I can see it, I can dock it, so that I can actually have it to the side here, and I can scroll through, various objects that I have. I can also go to different folders with different objects in it, and being able to navigate through various sources here. So this is a really nice way for you to be able to kind of quickly be able to find objects visually. It's also drag and drop. So if I just want to drag and drop a object from the browser, I can do that. I'll just double click it and open it up and be able to edit it and then place it in my project. So again, it's a really quick way for you to be able to manage objects in terms of visually navigating and quickly finding them and then dragging and dropping them into your project. Okay, hopefully that's given you guys a good overview of some of the resources out there, how the differences between the built-in importer in Archicad versus the ModelPort add-on importer and how those two differ and the pros and cons to both. I'm now going to talk a little bit about just if you are interested in demoing ModelPort, getting started with ModelPort, using this in your workflow, how you can start with that. So if you go to archvista.com/ModelPort, you can download a trial from there. Just navigate on the right-hand side, and you'll see the download trial option there. And you can then download a trial of ModelPort and start to use that. The difference between the trial and the licensed version is the trial will have a watermark on it, and that watermark will be there until you purchase a copy and then change it from a demo to a licensed copy. Once you've inputted your information in, your email in, it'll take you to this page, which is our ModelPort demo download. And all you need to do is just select your operating system, select whether you're on Archicad 22 or 21, click Start Download, and it will start to download. Now, one of the nice things also is that 23, which I believe was announced today, we'll have this out for Archicad 23 very shortly as well. And in terms of cost, ModelPort 2.0 is $159 per year, and we will have, and then if you're upgrading from previous versions of ModelPort, say ModelPort bundle, it'll be $99 for the upgrade, and then $159 per year after that. If you're doing this from the FBX DAE bundle that we had before, or the OBJ 3DS bundle, then it's $129 for either of those options as well. So that's what I have to show you today. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of that. I'm happy to take any questions. I do see there are some questions to the side over here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at those questions and see what questions we have here to review. If you want to ask any questions, do feel free to enter those questions into the control panel. And there's a questions panel there. You simply enter that in. I'll see it on my side. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has. So the first question, can you make custom 2D symbols for any object in Archicad without the ModelPort plugin? Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you wanted to just do the built-in process of bringing in a Archicad object, then yeah, I could bring an Archicad object. I can select that. I can go to Archicad to the File menu, and I believe it's Library Manager, Open Object, or Library is an open object, and we'll open it into the Object Editing dialog. If you've not used that before, it's a really powerful piece, but it can also be very complicated. You then have to go into the 2D script. You need to comment that script out so it doesn't show the 2D symbol is not being created from the 2D script. Once it comments out, you then go to your 2D symbol workflow screen. You can draw your 2D symbol. Make sure to draw it so it works with the symbol, and so it's correlated to that. But yes, you can do that, certainly. It does take a lot of steps to do it. But that's always available. I do know clients who like to do that. Let's see, another question. Have you created the manner in which ModelPort license can easily be shared between two computers? Good question. Yes, we are actually working on that. We actually are going to have an update to ModelPort here shortly that will allow us to be able to start doing that between two computers. So yeah, we should have that shortly, Peter. That's something we're working on right now. Another question here. Can you clean up Archicad objects that have already been imported into Archicad? Yeah, that's what I was talking about before. You can open up that into the 2D view within your object settings. One thing to be aware of there is it's very easy to do if it's an object that's very, how should I put it, square box, right? It just, you're not dealing with curves. Once you start dealing with curves, it becomes really complicated to start trying to get all that triangulation out. The triangulation I was showing earlier, it can be really problematic when you're trying to deal with editing that 2D line work. So yes, you can, but it's when it becomes a curved object, a curved element, and creating that 2D line work that becomes problematic. So yes, you can, but it does create those kinds of problems for you. Is the cost per station or per office? It's per station, but as I mentioned before, what you can do, depending upon how you want to work with this, we have some clients who will have a couple stations with Archicad, with ModelPort on it, where they're generating and working with the objects, and then the other stations simply have the ModelPort installed but not licensed so that they can take advantage of the ModelPort format. Does the ModelPort 2.0 browser allow us to browse our BIM library folder with our office saved object? Not yet. It only is actually giving you a preview of the imported objects that you've downloaded, not the Archicad objects. We're working on that for the future. That is a request that we've had from a number of users. We also feel it's an important feature for the future. And so we'll be adding that in. In fact, we'll be working on that here for a future update. But that is one of the requests we've gotten. So, but not yet. You can't take your Archicad and just throw it in there yet, but that is coming. Do you have Archicad 21 or higher? Do you have to? Yes. Unfortunately, at this point, we didn't develop Archicad 20 and below simply because we knew Archicad 23 was coming out here shortly. So we'll be supporting 3 versions: Archicad 21, 22, and 23 moving forward. But it does take a lot to develop for past versions. So we're starting 21 and up. Let's see. I know you covered this, but I missed some info. When I'm working on a project between 3 computers or more, do I need ModelPort on each computer? If not operating from a central server, do I need 3 licenses? Yeah, so good question. So if you're using the ModelPort format, which is the default format, it gives you the most options for maintaining or for editing options, as well as for being able to reduce the file size of the object and for polygon reduction. If you're using that format, then what you want to do is to have ModelPort on all the workstations. Now you could only have ModelPort licensed on one workstation, which is where you would do your editing. And then the others would simply show you the objects, but wouldn't be able to edit the objects. If you want to be able to edit the objects, excuse me, on all the workstations, then you would want to have licensed versions for all the workstations. Does that make sense? Let's see, next question. How many workstations can operate off a single license? Is there a price break? Yeah, there is a price break for multiple licenses. If you want to talk to us, we don't actually list it on the website, but we can give you a price break on multiple licenses if you're interested in that. Certainly happy to talk to you about that. As I mentioned just a second ago, the big requirement is that if you're going to have it on multiple stations and you want to use the ModelPort format, just make sure you have ModelPort installed on all the workstations, even if they're not licensed. Now, that said, if you want to be able to edit those individual objects on all the workstations, then you do need to have licensed copies on all the workstations. Can you activate or deactivate licenses according to a computer when needed? Yes, you can do that. Great, guys. That was a lot of good questions. Are there any other questions I can answer? All right. Well, I'll wait another second or two for any other questions. In the meantime, yeah, if you're interested in getting started or taking a look at it, just go to our website, archivista.com/modelport, and you can download a demo from there. And if you've got any questions, my email or info@archivista.com. Just email us or call us, and we're happy to answer any questions.